Well, welcome everyone. We are going to go ahead and get started with our first presenters. We have Tracy and Anna who are going to give the first presentation. If there are questions, you can go ahead and enter them in the Q&A or in the chat, and we'll address them after each talk as we're able, or we'll save them till the end and address them there. Tracy and Anna, go ahead.
Great. I'm going to just get into slideshow mode and
Perfect. Thank you, Tracy. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today and for the opportunity to speak as part of the Year of Open Science's Culminating Conference. I'm Anna Van Gulik, the Government and Funder Lead at Figshare, and I'm joined today by my co-presenter, Tracy Snowden, Product Manager at Elsevier for Mendeley Data. Today, we're going to be speaking about the model of co-opetition that structures our collaborative work in the GRAE, in the NIH Generalist Repository Ecosystem Initiative, or GRAE, which some of you may have heard mentioned in sessions yesterday on open science plumbing infrastructure or NIH data sharing. So I've had the privilege of co-chairing this collaborative project for the past year with John Chodacki, and Tracy's recently taken over co-chairing it. So today we'll tell you a little bit more about this co-opetition way of working, as well as some of our accomplishments and our work in progress that are resulting from the collaboration. So GRAE is sponsored by the NIH Office of Data Science Strategy and was launched just over 2 years ago in 2022. The program brings together 7 different generalist repositories to work together to enhance support for data sharing and reuse, including the Harvard Dataverse Project, Center for Open Science's Open Science Framework, Figshare, Dryad, Mendeley Data, Vivli, and Zenodo. Next slide, please. GRAE has a mission to enhance the biomedical research data ecosystem and help researchers both find and share data in generalist repositories, which serve an important role in the data landscape by providing flexible, trusted repositories for any data set or research output, regardless of discipline or format, when a discipline-specific repository is not available. And the GRAE program has several key objectives that you see outlined here, including that help to lower the barrier for data sharing and discovery across repositories, including consistent metadata, common metrics, and community outreach. And Tracy will tell you about some of this work. But first, I'll focus on this GRAE objective to commit to co-opetition. Next slide. The term co-opetition, a portmanteau of cooperation and competition, was originally coined in a 1996 book describing the practices of competing businesses, but was also used more recently in a 2020 NIH workshop on the role of generalist and institutional repositories. In the context of generalist repositories, we take this to mean that co-opetition means drawing a value line, with some repository features falling above and below this line. Below this line, our repositories cooperate on having common features and common standards, for example, metadata, persistent identifiers, and metrics. And above the value line, we continue to compete with each other, offering certain unique features and services. Next slide, please. The generalist repositories are participating in GRAE are in many ways similar, but we also are different in some ways. So we all support fair data sharing across all disciplines, and we strive to adhere to repository best practices, including those outlined by NIH and OSTP. And we also aim to leverage existing community standards. We all work with DataCite metadata and use common persistent identifiers like ORCID and ROR, which you've already heard about during this meeting. However, there's also some differences across the repositories. They include both nonprofit, academic, and commercial organizations. Some of us use open source infrastructures, and others use proprietary code bases. And we offer an array of different features and support different use cases, data visualization, different file types, different licenses, variations in how we do curation, or if we offer controlled access options. Next slide, please. The GRAE co-opetition model allows all of these 7 repositories to work together, so to form a collaboration amongst ourselves to jointly advance repository functionality to support data sharing, discovery, and reuse. And this is really a unique opportunity that we're grateful to NIH for recognizing the importance of generalist repositories in this space, and for allowing us to come together. It's actually been a very interesting and a fruitful opportunity for the past 2 years, and we're looking forward to the work going forward. This way of working as a co-opetition allows for us to develop a cohesive and interoperable generalist repository landscape, which will hopefully inform the data landscape beyond generalist repositories as well. This is partly through simply regular communication across our repositories, working together on a daily and weekly basis. Part of that work includes the implementation of common best practices and standards, determining standards and implementing them at each of our repositories, and doing that by leveraging these existing community standards to improve interoperability as much as possible. This also lets us help support the flexible data sharing use cases that researchers come to us for and provide training and outreach for these. Then once data is shared, we can support interoperability of data discovery and impact tracking across all of our repositories, so data is not siloed and impact can be tracked. And lastly, it helps us form unified partnerships with different community stakeholders, including institutions, government agencies, funders, and other community initiatives like the Research Data Alliance and so forth. At the same time, it still allows us to compete on those varying features. And of course, there are some challenges in working across these many different business models, infrastructures, and product roadmaps with distributed teams, like any collaboration. But it's been a really unique opportunity, and we're grateful to have it. And I'll let Tracy tell you a little bit about our work now.
Great. Thank you, Anna. So as a result of the recent NIH US federal mandates and the OSTP guidelines, one of those key FAIR practices that our co-opetition model is working on is the I in FAIR, which is interoperability, because interoperability really unlocks the discovery of data sets for researchers for the purpose of reuse. And so as my esteemed colleague Anna referenced earlier, in order to achieve interoperability, which provides the most fair and user-friendly search and browse experience for our research scientists, we have to first standardize some important elements. And those do include consistent metadata and common metrics. So when handled cooperatively, these two elements also form the foundation for the enhanced analytics and reporting that were referenced on the previous slide that could be differentiated competitively in order to provide more unique insights to a wider range of customers or constituents. So first, I just want to take a look at some of the achievements of our co-opetition working group in these areas. So if you look at the right-hand side of this screen, you can see the bigger picture of what are some of the common elements and what are some of the more unique repository features. And then the left-hand side is a screenshot of our now existing generalist repository comparison chart, which can be found if you click the link with the DOI on Zenodo. We are getting ready to update this comparison chart, but we hear from many people in our community that this is very helpful. So in terms of consistent metadata, Gray is adopting consistent models and has made recommendations that, as Anna mentioned, allow us to move forward with DataCite as a very critical partner in this area. And these can also be found using a DOI via Zenodo. And you can see from this slide just how much progress has actually been made, as a significant number of metadata fields are now shared across all repositories. And I think that a co-opetition model is what's allowed for this type of significant progress that's really useful to the entire community. And this work has resulted in recommendations which inform real-world use cases, which we have also completed some of these use cases as a co-opetition working group. So 4 of the introductory use cases which we have been able to catalog include sharing data as an NIH-funded researcher, funding and reusing data, institutional reporting, and NIH funder reporting. So as mentioned, this foundational work has allowed us to adopt the Make Data Count recommendations in order to implement common open metrics. And these are allowing us to think efficiently and effectively about the future of analytics and reporting, including plans to implement the DataCite usage tracker in order to have a better understanding of common metrics such as views, downloads, etc. But none of this work matters if it's not understood, embraced, and improved upon by and within the communities that we serve. So for this reason, our repositories come together. We have 3 subcommittees for planning, execution, and gathering feedback in order to conduct that community outreach. And that's a mechanism for soliciting and utilizing community feedback to more or less improve that virtuous cycle. Finally, what does the future hold, and how is this initiative helping the wider U.S. federal data infrastructure? And so, as Anna mentioned, Gray has begun to envision a world beyond just generalist repositories embracing these types of best practices. We do believe it is possible, for example, that domain-specific repositories and other research infrastructures might embrace a co-opetition model in order to further reduce barriers to data sharing and support the kind of interoperability that can foster open science for maximum positive global impact. And that's really the point. So lastly, we would like to invite you to stay in touch with the Gray repositories and our work, to ask questions. Please provide feedback on the work, develop partnerships, and learn about future outputs and events. So you can join our email list, and you can find all of our published outputs in a Gray collection in Zenodo, including a catalog of use cases, previous webinars, workshop presentations, and our common Gray metadata schema, as well as our data citation practice recommendations. So thank you very much for your attention and time today. And with that, I will turn it back over to our host.
Thank you very much, Tracy and Anna. Really, really interesting presentation. We did have one question in the Q&A while the next presenter. So actually, the next presenters is there someone here from Open Air? I think they are not here. So we will go ahead to Irene Morgenstern is going to go next. While she's getting set up, the question is, how can other organizations join Gray, and what are the requirements and commitments?
Right. Great question. This program was by invitation of the program organizers, so at the NIH ODSS. And so I can't speak on behalf of them fully, but this was a program that was organized by invitation. I think what we're looking to do in the future is build partnerships with other groups working on data repository interoperability, both in the US and globally, and work with them there. And certainly you can reach out to our program officer, Ishwar Chandramulaswaran, if you have any questions about that, as well as us. Thank you, though. We'd love to work together.
Wonderful. All right. Irene, go ahead, take it away.
All right. Wonderful. So thank you for having me here, Irene Morgenstern from the Children's Tumor Foundation. And I will be joined in a second here by my colleague, Robert Alloway from Sage Bionetworks. I figured we only have 12 minutes, so I want to just acknowledge the village or the key players here, including Sage Bionetworks, the Children's Tumor Foundations, NTAP, Gilbert Family Foundation, NF Open Science Initiative, and the NF, of course, community of patients, families, researchers, and clinicians. It really takes a village. And I'm going to be speaking on behalf of the foundation, and then Robert will jump in on behalf of the NF data portal. So for those that may not be aware of NF, it's a combination of neurofibromatosis and schwannomatosis. This is a family of progressive, debilitating genetic disorders that collectively cause tumors to grow on nerves throughout the body. And there are 3 main types: neurofibromatosis type 1, NF2-related schwannomatosis, and schwannomatosis. This is indeed a rare disease. And we only have 1 approved treatment for NF1 that was approved in 2020, and nothing so far for NF2-related schwannomatosis or schwannomatosis. Our mission at the foundation is quite simple. It is to drive research, expand knowledge, and advance care for the NF community. And we are laser focused on ending NF. But we have a few challenges. This is a rare disease indeed, and so we have a limited number of patients. We have a rather small but strong research community. Data oftentimes is siloed in various institutions or laboratories, and many times our data sets are not sufficiently sized for particular analyses. And to top all of this disease, as you saw in the various types and manifestations, is heterogeneous. And so all of this to say that as a rare disease community, we need to be data focused and promote open access policies. So although I wasn't here 10 years ago when the data portal came to life, I think the goals still remain in terms of what we're trying to achieve here. We are trying to unify research efforts and create a standardized, centralized data space that enables open access to data sets across various research initiatives. We are in the process, or one of our goals is to enhance funding efficiency and effectiveness. We are a funding agency. We want to make sure we're funding the right research and not being redundant in our investments. And so this idea of disseminating negative results and to refine and direct future research endeavors is very important to us. And lastly, building or fostering a collaborative scientific community in order to establish a dynamic platform for researchers to exchange resources, knowledge, and insights. So I think these are the goals coming in, and these still remain the goals for the NF portal. And I will go ahead and hand it off to Robert to tell you all about it.
Thanks, Irene. Just to double check, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. I'm using new headphones and I was having some issues with them yesterday. So yeah, today I'm going to be talking about the NF data portal. This is the first, and this might be a biased opinion, but we now think it's kind of the foremost data portal for NF1, NF2, and schwannomatosis rare disease data. We think it's a key platform in changing the paradigm of data sharing in the rare disease community. And it's, as far as I know, one of the only disease-specific rare disease data portals, and it's certainly one of the longest lived. We've started this effort in about 2014. And so what we've done here is, instead of taking the slice across data types, like a lot of federal repositories do, we've instead opted for a data type agnostic repository, but a disease-specific data repository. And there's the screenshot of the portal here on the right. Next slide, please. So this is a plot of the growth of our portal, just as in terms of the data that exists in the portal over time. So as I mentioned, we started around 2014. The first data sets came in 2015. And in this plot, we have the size of data in terabytes in red, and the number of files that our data portal has collected in blue. And so this is, at present, 268 terabytes of rare disease data, which far surpassed what we would ever have expected to come in, I think, back in 2014 when we were first thinking about this project. These data come from 119 different institutions, 236 different funded studies across the Children's Tumor Foundation, the Neurofibromatosis Therapeutic Acceleration Program, and the Gilbert Family Foundation, among some other funders. And kind of importantly, as I mentioned previously, we took this data type agnostic approach to collecting data. And so we have 58 different types of data representative of 123 different assays. And the portal, again, it's a rare disease data portal, but we're still pleased to see that we get somewhere in the order of 2,000 views and 200 different users per month. Next slide, please. And so over the past several years, we spent a lot of time thinking about the data journey and kind of refining it and optimizing it to try and make things as easy as possible for everyone in making data fair compliant. And so the project first starts by investigators completing a data sharing plan. Next slide, please. So this is a machine readable data sharing plan that we've built. This is powered by a data dictionary that we maintain with input from the community to collect the different types of data sets the different types of data sets that will be contributed, so that we have a plan for what to expect, what type of metadata we need to make available, what kind of curation we need to expect, and when we need to think about importing new metadata standards for data that we haven't seen before. This also helps us plan for when the data will actually come in, when we're able to release the data. We also collect governance information using the Duo ontology in this data sharing plan so that we can understand a little bit more about the sensitivity data of the data. The data we collect ranges from whole body MRI images with that have to be defaced from NF patients and rare disease genomics data all the way down to kind of preclinical mouse model data in terms of sensitivity. And so we have to kind of share data along a continuum to make sure that we are with a continuum of restrictions to make sure that data is or privacy is being appropriately respected. Importantly, I think the other important thing that I wanted to highlight here is that the data sharing plan is a contingent step for funding. So in order for the investigators to move forward with their project and receive funding from the foundations, they have to complete this data sharing plan with us. And this is a testament to the kind of policies that the funders have put in place in order to ensure that data gets shared. I think without this, we would have a much harder time getting anything from the investigators, just because it is a non-zero burden in terms of uploading and sharing data. So after that is complete, the researchers do all the wonderful science that they do. Researchers will upload their data to Synapse, which is the generalist repository that the NF data portal is built on, and was the reason for the question I asked in the last session, because I know that there are folks at Sage who are interested in having Synapse join the generalist, the Gray ecosystem. Once data is uploaded to Synapse, we require that they annotate data. This is often a collaborative effort between our team and the researchers. So we apply standardized metadata across all of the different files and surface that metadata to make it easily discoverable. And so we have developed some tools to take the data dictionaries that we've built and the files that people have uploaded and generate Google Sheets manifests so that people can kind of easily see all of the data they've uploaded, categorize it, and provide that metadata to us without having to know the data dictionary on their own. And then once this is done, all of this metadata is surfaced on the data portal, and that's what that looks like on the lower right. Next slide, please. And so there are a variety of ways that the data gets utilized that we've kind of either tried to help encourage or that we've just seen occur once the data gets released to the public. And so we've seen it data being from our portal being used for hypothesis generation in grant applications or for validation of findings that people have done in their own labs. We are involved in open access research projects and secondary analysis research projects. So we run an open research collaborative in schwannomatosis. We've run, I think at this point, 4 different hackathons for neurofibromatosis, where we try to get a variety of different types of people together to look at the data and ask interesting questions of it. And then we also think that importantly, it's just a cloud archive for all of the future staff in the labs. I know once a graduate student, I had to dig up data from an old decrepit computer that and that's not an experience that I want anyone ever to have to do again. So we're hoping that there's a lot of value for the labs themselves in archiving this data in a structured and shareable way. We're also working on building a repository of NF tools. So these are actual physical reagents or animal models, cell lines, antibodies. So we're collecting data from a variety of different databases that already collect this information and trying to better link that information to the data outputs that are coming from those model organisms and cell lines and antibodies in our portal. And then just finally, a big push in the past year or so has been trying to get data out of our portal. And so trying to figure out how we can plug it into various visualization and analysis platforms that exist in the ecosystem. So in the last year, with support from NTAP, we've been pushing a lot of the genomic tumor data that we're collecting to cBioportal, which is kind of one of the repositories that people use for exploring genomics data in cancer. And then we're also exploring collaborations with Pluto Biosciences, which is a low code or no code analysis environment that people can use to explore data without being a bioinformatician. So that's upcoming. And then, so I just wanted to highlight the Schwannomatosis Open Research Collaborative, which I mentioned on the last slide. So this is one of the rare diseases that we support in the NF Open Science Initiative. We saw a couple years ago that there were some great data sets out there that had been shared by schwannomatosis researchers, but a real dearth of of secondary use of that data. And so we actually put together an effort. So this is a former postdoc of mine who's now a scientist at Sage leading this project, Sasha Scott, who is leading the Schwannomatosis Open Research Collaborative. It's a model for kind of decentralized and collaborative computational biology research where we're trying to engage people from around the world. So we've collaborated with groups like the Bioinformatics Research Network to get kind of new individuals who don't have bioinformatics experience trained in those skill sets, and then getting them actually working with the schwannomatosis data. At this point, we have 9 active participants across 3 continents. And it's been really exciting because we were actually able to last year bring 3 of our participants from Brazil, Zambia, and California to attend the 2023 annual NF conference in Scottsdale. And so we're hoping that this type of investment brings more computational biologists, but also more new faces and more people from outside the rare disease research community into our research community, and really get them thinking about the data in different and interesting ways. Next slide, please. This is just a highlight of a few publications that have come out of secondary analyses of the data from our data portal. And so it's always really exciting to see. As a quick aside here, I'll note that one of the big pain points for us has been tracking these research outputs automatically and comprehensively. And so we can track them down manually, but it's often a challenge to find when people are reusing our data and publishing on it. And so any pointers that anyone has there, I'd love to hear about them. So in terms of what we've accomplished, we built a centralized data sharing repository. We've standardized data for cross-analysis across many different types of data sets in the NF space. We're hoping that our public data sharing has a wider reach and impact than what was previously observed in the NF community when everyone was keeping their data private. We're hoping that the reuse of existing research data is accelerating discovery, and we are growing the community of NF researchers. Our focuses for the next year or two are to ensure that data is readily available for AI or machine learning interrogation and integration of analysis platforms. We'll continue to implement new strategies to promote data access. And I think one of the big outstanding questions in this field for a lot of repositories is thinking about long-term sustainability. So how do we ensure that we're sustainable in the long term and grow in a way that makes the data as useful to as many people as possible? And I think with that, we'll take any questions.
All right, wonderful. Thank you. We are running just a smidge behind schedule, so I just want to check, is there anyone from Open Air who's here now and ready to present? If not, then we have plenty of time.
Paolo is in other session, so it's in parallel, and is joining. Sorry for that.
Okay, that's all right. We'll have
it was the same now.
We'll have Open Air last, and we will move on to CJ for our next presentation. Thank you very much, everyone from Children's Tumor Foundation and Sage Bionetworks.
Hi, folks. So I'm just going to share my screen quickly. There we go. Can everyone see that? Yep. Okay. Thumbs up. Great. Thank you so much. Oh boy. Sorry, I'm working on one screen and it's pretty small because I am traveling right now, but nice to meet you. My name is CJ Woodford, and I am a research associate with the International Technology Office with the World Data System. And I'm not presenting on only our work for the World Data System, which is a membership of repositories internationally, but really I'm presenting on behalf of an entire working group with the Research Data Alliance, which is the Global Open Research Commons International Model Working Group. And the types of things that we work on is already kind of been touched on by Gray and by the NF portal. And so we're looking at things not just on a discipline scale or a national scale, but really looking at it from an international interoperability scale. How do things work together on this global research ecosystem that we want to have? And so what we've created is a model for improved interoperability and collaboration as you're building or working through research infrastructures like repositories, or what we like to call commons. And so first of all, it's a question of what is a global open research commons, or what I'm going to be talking about as a GORC. And the idea of a GORC is kind of like what you might have heard of as an open science commons or a data commons. And it's essentially a way of providing shared virtual spaces, platforms, or a marketplace for data, research objects, and other services related to research. They can be large national or pan-national networks or organizations, but it can also be a federation of interconnected or otherwise independent research infrastructures that have a commitment to working together, like computing centers, working with repositories, working with service platforms. And I think the NF portal's brought in a great example of they're operating like a portal, but then they're also working with other service providers to get in that analysis part. Some larger examples on the international scale that you might have heard of are the European Open Science Cloud, the Australian Research Data Commons, and the African Open Science Platform. And so coordinating across these initiatives to enable a network of interoperable research commons is the goal of the GORC, to provide frictionless access to all research artifacts to everyone, everywhere, at all times, with the appropriate infrastructure, protocols, and support in place. And I do want to highlight that while we are relying on the word open, we mean as open as possible, as closed as necessary, because of course there's going to be protocols for different types of data that we need to consider. So where we come in as the Research Data Alliance, and then my groups, which are the GORC Interest Group and the GORC Working Group, the interest group itself provides a neutral place where people can have conversations about open research commons and how to develop them, what they mean, who identifies as one, and so on and so forth. And their whole thing is working on a roadmap, which is what this little squiggly nonlinear line is kind of showing, to say, how do we actually get to global development and integration of research ecosystems working together? They did come up with a typology of essential elements, which I'll talk about shortly, as well as a definition for what we can consider a commons to be. Essentially, a global trusted ecosystem that provides seamless access to high quality, interoperable research outputs and services, or essentially, digital research resources for the common good. And I think a lot of folks that work in research infrastructures like repositories, even institutional repositories, service platforms, and so on, would kind of see themselves reflected in that definition. The working group, on the other hand, operates under the umbrella of the interest group. And the goal was to recommend a model for attributes of global research commons that allows researchers, developers, policymakers, and funders to coordinate resources and create roadmaps for international interoperability. And so in the current form, the working group aims to answer what should be considered when you're building, expanding, operating, funding a commons. And the model itself, that what do you need to consider, will go back into the roadmap, which will then hopefully identify the how do we get there, the actual roadmap itself. The model, which I'll be presenting today, is operational on the basis of an individual research infrastructure. Small, large, national, pan-national, regional, discipline-specific, whatever. It's operational on that level. The roadmap, however, will be operational on the scale of this connecting everything together on a global platform. So regardless of what you're operating or what scale you're on, our model has considerations that are relevant for you when it comes to open research and open science practices. So it is, in fact, a set of considerations and non-prescriptive. And what we want to highlight is that this was really kind of falling back on what has been said earlier. It kind of takes a village. I am presenting on behalf of an entire working group, and we did a lot of work to kind of pull the model together. And so we had an extensive literature review, not systematic, because I'm not going to posit that the hundreds, if not thousands, of research articles and reports out there that talk about research infrastructure and open research practices were reviewed. They weren't, that's just way too much. But we did review a couple of hundred, including in particular the NIST RDAF and FAIR principles were huge inputs into that literature review. We also had a speaker series from 12 different research organizations internationally that helped us to identify what is a commons and what would you need to consider to kind of push forward open science and open research. These fed into the model, which was then iteratively reviewed by our working group. The working group was active over a couple of years, over 4 plenary sessions through the Research Data Alliance, 1 full-day workshop, which was very, very intensive, 26 meetings over those 2 years with about 70 members and 6 dedicated thematic task groups, some of which were working multiple hours a week on the model for a course of 8 months on top of their day jobs. And I do want to highlight and thank specific folks from the United States that helped with the task groups and also during our sessions through the Research Data Alliance, in particular the NIH, MIT libraries, and Berkeley labs. But we also had working group members from Carnegie Mellon University, the Center for Research in Biological Systems at UC San Diego, the University of Florida, and the University of Colorado Boulder. And so our model is organized based on the essential elements identified by the GORC interest group. They didn't just come up with a definition of a commons, they also had essential elements, where essentially, pun intended, a commons should have everything in each one of these hexagons, in each one of these essential elements. The model actually lies underneath these essential elements, where about 400 specific items were identified as considerations as you, again, build, develop, expand, or fund. And so while a commons should have something in every essential element, other kinds of research infrastructures might fit together to create a commons environment. So each one might not actually have something in each essential element, but together you create a cohesive whole. And so the point is to consider what's important for you and your community. And for funders and policymakers, it's important for them to look at the model and especially the essential elements and say, how do we ensure that there's sustainability for these research infrastructures as they work together for interoperability on a national and pan-national and hopefully global scale? So our human elements are highlighted here in white, including governance and leadership, rules of participation and access, sustainability, which kind of just sounds like funding, but it also includes things like transition plans, scalability plans, building community trust, engagement, human capacity, which can have a rough definition of the ability to create a human-friendly environment for all stakeholders in the commons community, both internally and externally. The center of a commons is interoperability and standards, and they actually relate to both the human elements and the technical elements. What we mean here by interoperability is the ability for research objects or tools from non-cooperating resources to work together with minimal effort. And then the standards are a repeatable, harmonized, and agreed upon way of doing something that's also documented. The technical items are along the bottom in blue. The main part being ICT infrastructure, encompassing compute, storage, network, and authorization and authentication infrastructure, your services and tools that work on top of your ICT infrastructure, and the research objects that you're operating on. And I would like to highlight that our current version of the model, version 1.0, is all about digital research objects and infrastructure. So our services and tools and research objects don't include physical tools or telescopes, physical research objects such as samples or research hardware. But hopefully future versions of the model will. So this is a dynamic thing that we want to keep building with the community. In addition to the main portions of the model, which belong to these 9 essential elements, or 10, depending on how you count them, we also came up with a set of considerations for lists of key performance indicators or KPIs and metrics, which are qualitative and quantitative measures that can be used to measure your uptake, engagement, and use of commons components. And so in total, the model is intended to help navigate implementing open research practices in your commons research infrastructure by guiding you through considerations on what to include. The elements are the main theme, but inside each main theme or each essential element, there's lots of considerations with extended descriptions, examples, consideration level to help guide you through, as well as primary sources. So I do want to spend a moment on model structure. Having 400 items, we did have to come up with a way of actually organizing that information. So the model is broken up into a set of entities, these essential elements, these hexagons that I've already highlighted, essential elements likely have categories of things inside of them, and then subcategories, which are finer granularity on the categories. Entities will have characteristics, and these are attributes, or a more granular version of that would be a feature. And so often what you'll see is essential element has an attribute, that attribute could have features, and then every characteristic is inherited parent to child for the entities. So if that essential element has a category, the attributes and features are inherited, and then also inherited to the subcategories. Right now, the model is in a spreadsheet format, and I'm not going to go through each one, but I will be sharing the slides in the chat in a moment, and I encourage you to go look at the spreadsheet of the model. Essentially, with the first 4 columns highlighting what item you have, so categories and subcategories, and attributes and features. And then each item has an extended description, examples where we could find them, a consideration level to help you guide through, and primary sources to tell you where we actually found it and created these items from. We do have some adopters that are already using the model to actively restructure or build upon their commons or research infrastructure. And while I don't have time to get into each one in particular, I will just mention who they are. And so first one being Elixir, which is a life sciences commons throughout the European Union, headed by one of our colleagues, Walmar Ekstrom. They've been a kind of a long time lurker in the GORC working group. They've been citing our work since 2021, even before when the model came out. And we have a workshop with them coming up in June to help their individual nodes pick up the model and use it for design purposes. We're also working with SURF in the Netherlands, which is a national level commons that kind of coordinates and organizes research infrastructure for the entirety of the Netherlands across disciplines. And they've been finding it really helpful to use the model as a gap analysis for their programs and units, as well as to help guide governance decisions on what comes next for their work. And lastly, we've been working with Reason, which is a proposed national infrastructure in Norway. And they used it to create a funding proposal. And they have definitely made the most in-depth, comprehensive use of the model that I've seen so far, where they went down into each individual item and said, do we want to incorporate this or not in Reason? One thing they did say about the model is that it made their proposal writing, which was about a 200-page document because they're applying for quite a bit of money. It made it such that they could actually push out that proposal in about 2 months at a part-time work. So really help them put that funding proposal together, and fingers crossed that they'll get funded. From the
CJ, can I interrupt? I'm sorry. We've got one more group. They are still here, so we're gonna can you wrap up, please?
Yep. We do have some suggestions for using the model, which is essentially start with the essential elements, drill down as needed, map your existing projects, and then use it as a guide for priority setting. And we've got some resources here that can help you use it, including a machine actionable semantic object. Lastly, we're still ongoing. As I said, there's lots of things for us to do, including mapping to current frameworks like the NIST RDAF and GRAY. So I encourage you to come check us out at the upcoming Research Data Alliance 22nd plenary in May, and to check out some of our new working groups, got them on the slide here, and to sign up for our working group and interest group to keep in the know. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Super interesting work. I think that model is going to have a lot of value for many communities. Paulo, are you ready to start for open air?
Yes, apologies. I was listed also in the other session. So I showed up in the other session and happily presented, and then I was called up here. So I don't know what happened, but yes. So share screen. We have 20 minutes, and am I the last one?
You are the last one, and you have 12 minutes, although the next session is going to start at 11. So it's a very tight 12 at this point.
Okay, no problem. I'll try to make it right. Okay, so what I'm presenting today is the open air graph and what it is and how we build it and how you can all use it. For those who don't know what a scientific knowledge graph, this is an SKG, is a common name now that came up in the community. It describes a collection of metadata, basically, that can be used for discovery, for monitoring, mainly for research assessment, and so on, that comprises different kinds of entities, research products, so publications, data, etc., plus organization information, researcher information, could be services, data sources, for example, could be many other kinds of metadata. These are typically collected from a number of sources, which may vary in size, in number, and in typology, depending on the scope, of course, of the graph and who wants to use it. So the idea of the OpenAI graph is to build one that is open, as complete as possible. So we go cross-discipline, cross-borders. We want to deduplicate it. We want to make it transparent. So track everything that we do from the data collection, so the provenance, to the various actions that we perform to improve the quality of the graph. We want it to be participatory. We have many collaborators in Europe, research groups, also companies that are helping us in shaping up the graph and making of good quality. And we want it to be trusted. And decentralized means that basically we want the content of the graph to be redistributed where it's going to be for sure persisted forever, which are the institutional repositories, the publisher sites, and so on. So we have the tools and the mechanisms to make this possible. So this is the let's say bird eye view of the data model. So we have products at the center, publications, data, and software. At the level of the products, we also collect indicators where these are available or we can produce them. Products are linked to persons, which are the authors, and they can be linked to the organizations to which these authors are affiliated. They can be linked to projects, in turn linked to streams and funders. We are collecting from around 30 different funders and growing. So we collect straight from their databases at the granularity level of the projects. And we are trying to do everything that is possible to link this to the research products themselves. Of course, as I mentioned, we track provenance. So we track the origin, so the data source from which we collected the metadata and where the files of the product are possibly stored. So we have a diversity of research products because we really believe in the diversity of science, and we support the idea of open science and how it should be monitored, not only in the innovation that it brings, but also in the practices of open science. So openness, fairness, and so on. So the graph is well equipped in terms of information to serve this kind of use cases. We therefore embed indicators where these can be computed by us. So from the usual citation counts to many others like usage counts, where we collect downloads and views from the data sources that are giving us the metadata, to APC, so article processing charges from various libraries that we attach at the persistent identifier level, and from various other tools like BIP, and of course, citations from the known databases. We keep persistent identifiers and the schemas, and we also collect from non-persistent identifiers data sources. This is the case for institutional repositories, for example, which we believe are a key element in the scholarly communication in order to enable green open access, but also to preserve publications for the future. We produce stable graph identifiers, so we provide uniform and stable persistent identifiers for the end-stream applications, which is very important in order to build them. So we are basically tracking science. So every time a publication comes up, we try to have it. Every time a publication is cited, we try to have it. And of course, it's the same for projects or organizations and everything that is related with it. With the two main issues of monitoring and discovery. So I'm not going deep here because it would take forever. So the whole production chain of the graph counts on the fact that we are collecting from data sources that can be compliant to the guidelines that we are providing, which are the basis of the European Open Science Cloud at the moment. So the OpenAI guidelines. Many platforms actually provide them out of the box. So if you install a DSpace or a DPrint, or a Dataverse or an ePrints, you find these guidelines implemented as part of your system. In some cases, instead, data sources do not implement these guidelines, and we call them instrumental, and we aggregate from them. These are Crossref, DataSci, DOAJ, which each of them we have collaborations or MOUs where we try to establish the various links and the quality of the mappings. There's plenty of this across different sources as well. So we aggregate this metadata, we build the first version of the graph, then we enrich it because we also download PDFs when this is possible, open access PDFs, or having one-to-one agreement with the publishers. We have many with Elsevier, Springer, ACM, and so on. So we collect tens of millions of full text, we mine, and we enrich the graph with the links that we derive from such mining. Typically links from publications to projects or publications to data, publications to software, which are quite rare and not necessarily provided by the scientist. After that, we perform the duplication. So we bring in together metadata records that describe the same entity or the same object, but it is deposited in different places. This is a very common thing. archive versus published version, and so on. We bring them together. We keep provenance, of course. We keep different licenses. We keep different links, but we track everything and we build one object. Then we enrich by inference. Again, this is a long story. So we can use, for example, the relationships between the objects to propagate information from one to another, ORCID identifiers, sustainable development goals that we have inferred, or the fields of science and so on. So we try to complete the graph to the extent that we can. Then we finalize, index it, produce dumps, and put it free through the APIs. So for that, of course, we need a quite stable infrastructure and a lot of skills. So we have a rich team that is working behind the scenes. We have those responsible for the cleaning, the deduplication and enrichment. So the contact, establishing contacts with the data sources, collecting the metadata, understanding how to harmonize it, how to map it properly in our model with the help of the communities when the data sources are not fully compatible. And then we have, of course, the full text mining. So that's a completely different set of skills. And the artificial intelligence part, so GPUs and so on. So we are trying to complete the graph as much as possible, also thanks to collaborations with many research groups in Europe. Again, I invite you all to take part of this action. It's public good in the end. And we do this on a quite robust infrastructure located in Poland. These are samples of the data sources from which we are collecting. Today, we count 2,500 different entry points, different APIs from which we collect. Some of these are aggregators or full publishers. So in turn, we collect from other data sources, 70K in general, of which we keep track, of course, and we keep track of the provenance. These are just ideas, just to give you, let's say, a view of what we're doing. So from the thematic repositories like Repack, Archive, and so on, to the catch-all repositories like Zenodo, like Dryad, Figshare, to the known aggregators like DOIJ, La Referencia, and Cielo, to the authorities like Crossref and DataSide, and so on, through other graphs like ours, so Open Citations, we used to have Microsoft Academics, and to the different funders. We also take a look at the software side, so some publications, some software is properly published through specific data sources. In some cases, this is not the case. So we mine through GitHub and many other repositories. We connect to software heritage to carve out of this scholarly communication infrastructure research software. That's not obvious. And again, we could spend a day here. These are the numbers after the duplication that we can take a look at. As you can see, software is still suffering compared to the rest, but research data are flying and publications together with it. We count today, I think, 600,000 unique ORCID identifiers behind research data. So this means that there's the 10%, let's say, of ORCID is publishing research data. We count 4 million unique names, though, in research data metadata, which means that many are still to be undigged and unburied, let's say, from the crowd. So it's a very good indicator. Then, of course, we have all the citations that we all care about, publication links, including the open citations, the COCI, the Crossref, we bring them in. We also mine 10 millions that we redistribute to those partners. We also have a very good relationship with DataSide, with which we're exchanging data, especially with this new DataSide data corpus that is coming up. So these are numbers that you can check through the slides later on. Consumers, we have researchers. Of course, they use our graph to build their own science and publish papers, but we have organizations like ministries, for example, the European Open Science Cloud itself, of course. This won't shut up, okay. The World Bank is an example, but we have organizations like research scientific organizations and the funders. European Commission, but also many national funders. We have funders from Europe, but also from the US, Asia, Australia, and so on. And the publishers, which include also companies, of course, behind, with which we have very good relationships in terms of the fact of data exchange, let's say, agreements in many cases, but also we use each other's services, as Scopus, for example, is using our data publication links. You can access the graph through datasets via Zenodo. We have the whole graph, but also slices of the graph, so you can appreciate different subsets. You can access it through the APIs. You will find all the information that you need through graphs.openair.eu. There's a quite rich documentation. You can dig into it to better understand what we do in every single phase of the production chain that I described, the data model, the APIs, why some whys of our choices, because these have to be clear, the duplication, how we produce stable identifiers, and so on. So we try to be as transparent as possible. But if you have questions, come here. Openair.flarm.cloud is the forum that we have very recently launched because of the huge amount of emails that we received, and we wanted to our answers to the questions to be useful also to others. So we came up with this. The graph again is public good, so we really seek for collaborations to enrich quality and coverage, from telling us, hey, this record has something wrong, to research contributions. So end users' feedbacks are key for us, okay? And of course, you're always welcome to contact us and help us in building this public good. I'm done.
Thank you very much. Well done. Right under the time limit. I think this has been a really enriching discussion. I see many possible overlaps and synergies between the different initiatives that have been discussed here. I'll just highlight one more synergy that I noticed, which was the SciX group, NASA's SciX group presented in the last session, Organizational Stories C. And I would recommend checking out the recording for that one as another initiative that seems to have a lot of shared characteristics with some of the things that were discussed today. Thank you all very much for joining us, and I hope you will stick around for the plenary starting after this.